My sermon passage is Mark chapter 13, verses 24 to 37, page 882 in the Pew Bible. But in those days, after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away before all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But of that day or that hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Take heed, watch, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Watch therefore, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or in the morning, lest he come suddenly and find you asleep. And what I say to you, I say to all, watch. The word of the Lord. May God grant us wisdom and courage for interpretation. Verse 37 again from the Revised Standard Version in the pews. And what I say to you, I say to all, watch. Verse 37 again from the New Revised Standard Version, which is my personal default Bible version, and it's what prompted the title of this sermon. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. So watch, keep awake, stay woke. Whether waiting for a leader of the household to come home in the evening, or waiting for Christmas Day to celebrate the first coming of Christ and the birth of God's will done on earth as it is in heaven, or waiting for the promised second coming of Christ and the completion of the work of doing God's will and work on earth as it is in heaven. Watch, keep awake, stay woke. Stay woke. I don't know how anybody who knows me could expect me not to go there with this passage about the apocalypse. Stay woke. I mean, that's Advent in a nutshell, isn't it? And I think it's the main genuine response to the gospel itself. Watch, keep awake, stay woke. And keep awake, as the NRSV puts it, gives us a chance to hear in a safe place what woke actually means, rather than what a bunch of clowns and worse want people to think it means. A safe place this place is. Not because we all agree on everything all the time, but because we're honest with one another. And honesty, unlike so much political and religious rhetoric, is still safe. Honesty is safe. So, since Jesus in the Gospel of Mark exhorts listeners and readers waiting for the last days to watch and keep awake, let's unpack woke and its meaning for our days, which may or may not be the last days, since, as Jesus also says, but of that day or that hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. People have taken the phrase, the exhortation to stay woke, and twisted it away from its actual meaning. Lest there be any confusion, knowing, of course, that all definitions are flawed and incomplete in a living language, I went and looked it up, even though a lot of times an appeal to the dictionary is the first refuge of the intellectually lazy. But you can point to it, right? But in this case, it looks like the clowns and worse have tried to alter the meaning of woke so fast to turn it negative that the dictionary for now still preserves what I think we all mean by woke, and it provides a glimpse of the changing meaning in progress. Merriam-Webster says, woke, definition 1A, adjective, chiefly U.S. slang, aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. So call me woke. Here's an example. Someone said Brad Pitt is not only woke, but the wokest man in Hollywood because he uses his status and his production company, Plan B, to create space for artists of color with such films as 12 Years a Slave, Selma, and Moonlight. That is a benign, unloaded use of the word woke. But wait, there's more. The dictionary goes on. Woke is often used in contexts that suggest someone's expressed beliefs about such matters, that is, racial and social justice, are not backed with genuine concern or action, end quote. That is an unfriendly and loaded use of the word woke. Unfriendly and loaded. And may I add, often heard by commentators on Fox, or on the other extreme, which I personally hear only secondhand at least, and then by accident. Here's an example of that. Someone wondered, there's never really a moment where a person of color doesn't have to deal with discrimination, whether it be veiled and passive or as blunt as possible. So woke white people, why can't you step in? Good question. And then there's fake woke. Someone said, we put the hashtags on our social media. Say her name, I can't breathe, Black Lives Matter, and repeat. The problem is that the level of concern we express online doesn't match the everyday behavior we exhibit. Of course, that's because social media is comedic or cynical performance art for lots of people, and it's a haven for anonymous cowards. Now, definition 1B, reflecting the attitudes of woke people. Example, in our newly woke times, there has been increased scrutiny of old films dealing with sensitive subjects, end quote, as there should be. A perfect personal example for me, in Fort Smith, Arkansas, 51 years ago, and unknown to me then, but also for my wife at about the same time in Texas, was the 1972 re-release of Song of the South, the first movie either of us saw in a movie theater, with our mamas. Walt Disney's 1946 treatment of the old Uncle Remus stories was controversial from the start. Song of the South has not been re-released since 1986, and probably won't be now unless it's part of a documentary, which would be appropriate. Now, woke, definition 2 from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Politically liberal or progressive, as in matters of racial and social justice, especially in a way that is considered unreasonable or extreme, end quote. Here's an example. Someone said, national conservatives view today's liberals as woke cultural warriors who pose an existential threat to the nation and its traditions. Pshaw. When did they not consider liberals, whether in politics or religion, extreme? And garden variety liberals and progressives a threat to the nation? That's paranoia. But a threat to traditions? Yes, absolutely. Unreasonable and extreme traditions, especially. See how easy it is to play that old extremism blame game? It's better not to play it at all, but all sides do. And that ties wokeness to watch and keep awake in this passage from Mark on the first Sunday of Advent. The enemies of wokeness perceive an existential threat, a threat to existence as they know it. And the opponents of extremism on the right, particularly Christian nationalism, perceive a threat to existence as we know it. So we all have something of an apocalyptic worldview like this passage does. And the similarities between our time and the time the Gospel of Mark was written might help us figure out how to live faithfully on our own edge. Mark 13 anticipates several futures by reflecting and recycling apocalyptic scenarios for new contexts. For example, on one side, a second term as president by Donald A. Trump and his party taking control of Congress, and it is his party. And on the other side, fear of a second term as president for Joe Biden and the other party taking control of Congress. Neither used to be seen as an existential threat, at least not in my memory, especially not one dragging churches and so-called free-range Christians into it. But here we are. Christopher Hudson, a Bible professor at Abilene Christian University in Texas, outlines all the apocalyptic scenarios that Mark draws into chapter 13 in the Gospel of Mark. The Son of Man coming in the clouds in verse 26 comes from the book of Daniel, which relies on Babylonian oppression in the 6th century BC to explain the Jews' situation later in the 2nd century BC, when yet another empire controlled them and other peoples by forbidding all foreign religions, which for them meant no circumcision and no sacrifices. And that sounds like the final judgment. That's one apocalypse, maybe two or three. Earlier in verse 2, Jesus predicts that the temple in Jerusalem will be destroyed. And that sounds like the year 70 AD, when Jews revolted against Rome, and Rome did destroy the temple. And he does so by leaning for meaning on oppression in both the 6th century BC and the 2nd century BC to explain Roman oppression in Jesus' own time and just after. And that's another apocalypse, or three or four. And it accounts for verse 30, where Jesus says, "This generation will not pass away before all these things take place." And just in case you're confused, and it is pretty confusing, Jesus smooths it all out by saying to the first hearers and readers of Mark and to us, "What I say to you, I say to all, watch." We are among the all in that verse. I say to all. We're a part of that. So watch, or keep awake, or stay woke. Professor Hudson says what we have in Mark 13 is a basic apocalyptic scenario lifted from Daniel and applied to new situations. But the basic message is this, and this is as fitting for our time as in Daniel's time, and as in Jesus' time, and for all time, until the prophesied so-called end time, which, never forget, is actually the promise of a new start, another new advent. The message is this: the rebellion against the reign of God is strong as the wicked oppress the righteous. Things will get worse before they get better. But hang on just a little longer, because just when you are sure you cannot endure, God will intervene to turn the world right side up. That's the message of the gospel, the good news of Jesus, the baby to come, and the promise of the Son of Man to come. In the meantime, Professor Hudson points out, amid the smoke of battle, the fog of politics, the confusion of economic distress, the babble of would-be leaders wearing God masks and claiming divine authority, how shall we know which way to turn? God's people should not be surprised or confused, because Jesus warned us ahead of time that such things would happen. History shows us it happens time and again. The powers that be will lull us to sleep by reassuring us that they have our best interests at heart as they pursue their own agendas. They play to our fears, our prejudices, our self-interests, so we do not notice their demonic behaviors. So, watch, keep awake, personal Jesus, social justice, Lord have mercy, stay woke. Amen. Amen.